Hello and welcome to a new video on my channel. Today we are doing another video in my series that I call Bundle Builds. The idea of this series is I limit myself in the number of packs I use based on the framework of the bundles we can create in the Origin app to save a little bit of money. Each build in this series of videos only features 3 different packs: an expansion pack, a game pack, and a stuff pack, sometimes a kit, really with the idea of trying to understand what we're getting for our money. And if you only are working with a limited number of packs or you have a limited budget to buy this very, very expensive game, what can you get with money that you do have? So in this video today, we are going to be using 3 packs, no kit. And the packs that we're using is the Cottage Living expansion pack, why do I always forget this as soon as I start recording? The Cottage Living expansion pack, the Jungle Adventure game pack, and the Laundry Day stuff pack. You may be thinking, what in the world is the overlap between Cottage Living and Jungle Adventure? The answer is Italy. So here's the thing. The Jungle Adventure pack has a vaguely South American, Latinx kind of flair to it. And I have a lot to say about that pack in general, but there's a lot of overlap with items that feel a bit more, I'll say, rustic, a bit more lived in. There is a little bit of overlap in terms of wood tones that are used, which if you watched any of my videos, you know that wood tones are really a baseline for me in terms of understanding which packs work well together. And then with Laundry Day, we have a lot of sort of cozy elements that are involved with that pack that I thought fit really well into the house that we're making today. So let's get to that. What are we making today? Today, like the title says, we are creating let's say a couple 100-year-old farmhouse that is nestled in the hills of Tuscany. I just got back from a little vacation in Italy where my partner and I took our moms to Italy, and we were there for about 2 weeks. It was incredible. And I'm feeling really inspired by older architecture that has a human sensibility to it. I'm really loving right now buildings that you can tell were made by human hands. And I wanted to see how I could replicate that in The Sims 4. With this build, I will say I did my best. I really wanted to create something that felt like an actual farmhouse that you may find in Tuscany, not the sort of home goods version of Tuscan homes, if that resonates with anybody. I really wanted this to feel authentic to the inspiration. So I would say my goal really was for this to feel like a real home and for this to kind of communicate the essence of Italy that I got during my time while I was visiting there. So what you won't find in this build is, I don't really prioritize like picture perfect rooms. This definitely isn't my personal style of interior design, but I think what you'll see as the video goes on is something that is very aligned to what I believe to be useful, functional, real-world interior design. I don't really focus on that sort of like Instagram picture-perfect feeling for any of my Sims 4 builds, really, but especially when I'm working on something that I intend to be a family home. I want it to feel like a real house. I want it to feel lived in. And when I say lived in, I don't necessarily mean cluttered, because I don't think that's accurate either. But you'll see that, when I pick side tables, they don't necessarily match. Another thing that I think really helps builds feel like they're real world is limiting yourself in terms of the materials that you use in flooring and wallpaper, limiting the lighting fixtures that you use, and even, different types of hardware like sinks. I think having the same flooring run throughout an entire house is very realistic. I think having the same doors is very realistic. I think using a really limited number of floor fixtures, like the apartment I live in right now, we have the same lighting fixture in every room. It doesn't matter if it's the living room, bedroom, bathroom, it's all the same light. And I think small details like that in The Sims 4 really helps communicate the idea that this is a real space. So I'm curious what you think of this build as we kind of continue to go on here. Like I said, not necessarily my style per se, but really this build is a good example of my design philosophies when it comes to the kind of things I like to make in The Sims 4. Now, this build is not necessarily inspired by one particular building that I found, but what I will say is that when we visited Italy, we had the opportunity to tour a family-owned vineyard, And while we were there, we got to taste all the products that they made, which also included olive oil. And we had lunch served by the family that owned this vineyard. So really, really cool experience. And one of the things that I loved about that building that we were in was that there was a massive courtyard in the middle of the entire building. And so that's kind of how I started this design, was to create this big U-shaped building that had a central courtyard where, I think the family that lives here, or the couple that live here, or whoever, people who like to entertain, would have the majority of their meals. Did I mention what packs I'm using? I think I did. It's only been 10 minutes. How can I forget that? Yeah, I did. Okay. One of the other things about the exterior is that I really wanted to focus on realism. And so depending on the type of builder or Sims player you are, you may have noticed that, the way that I placed windows and doors isn't always perfect. It's not symmetrical for this build. Sometimes windows, I think, actually are a little bit higher than others. Again, is another kind of example of what I think is realistic design in The Sims 4. And in my mind, this is a historic building. This is a building that's a couple hundred years old. The windows that it uses may not necessarily match. Maybe elements of this build were modified over time. And this build doesn't necessarily follow the more, I think, standardized approach we take to building today. It's not like the typical suburban home that has perfectly peaked roofs that are very symmetrical and even with windows on either side of the door. It's a little different, okay? So anyway, we're in the kitchen right now, and I actually spend a lot of time in the kitchen during the speed build, but also while I was working on this building. It was the first room that I finished. And the kitchen, I think, is a good example of the rest of the build. And for me, it's kind of the most realized room that really showcases what I wanted to accomplish with this build. And so you'll see, it's kind of weird. It's a little weird. First, the kitchen is raised up off of the rest of the house. And the way that it connects to the rest of the house is also peculiar. The kitchen has two entrances. One is from the central courtyard, and the other one is just from the side of the house. The dining room that is adjacent to it is a level lower, and the kitchen is also not connected to the main entryway of the house, which, isn't what I think most people would do. That's also how a lot of these types of houses are laid out. They aren't necessarily the most efficient. They aren't necessarily the sort of like open concept living that we think of today. And the way that rooms were even utilized at the time that these homes were created is very different than how we utilize them today. Yes, it would have made a whole lot of sense if the kitchen was directly connected to the main entryway and also had like a really nice walkthrough from the kitchen to the living space to the dining room. But yeah, I just thought the kind of inconvenience of this layout made it feel a little bit more grounded. And I like that. Really easy fix if you don't. I'm really curious how people are going to feel about the decisions I made for this build. But if you like the look of this build, ultimately, once it's done, very easy things to fix and remedy if that drives you wild. And it's not a perfect room. We have, some laundry tucked away in the corner. There's kind of a big space in the middle, and everything is just sort of wrapped around the perimeter. These are not necessarily akin to the design sensibilities of today, but I think it really captures what I wanted to do with this house pretty well. So you'll see that we skipped a bit here while I was figuring out the general layout, the wallpaper, flooring, all of that for the house overall. And right now the living room has this yellowy golden stucco to it. Ultimately, this changes, and just about every room ends up getting a white stucco or a white cement, aside from the bathrooms, which all feature the same tile treatment. I was trying something with the color and it didn't end up working for me. But here's the living room, and you'll see, like I was mentioning earlier, the living room features the same fireplace as the kitchen, and there's actually one more fireplace that we're going to do upstairs as well. One thing that I also tried to do with this layout was keep plumbing and fireplaces in similar areas of the house. So we have plumbing on the left and right side, and then when I work on the upstairs of this, I also have plumbing on the left and right side in similar spaces where the sinks are on the first floor. Same thing with the fireplaces. I kept everything in sort of a general location just to try and think about how maybe this house would actually have been built. And then the last room that we're working on here on the first floor is just a little artist studio. Most of the houses I create end up having a room like this. My sim self is a creative sim self, if you couldn't have guessed that. And so a lot of times I like having skill building activities in as many places as I can, and the easel is one that I usually default to. That room, though, if you do end up downloading this house and want to use it for some family gameplay, it could be very easily converted into a bedroom, and it's adjacent to a bathroom, so even better. And I also chucked a little woodworking table behind the stable outside. But yes, so as we go upstairs, you'll see that it's pretty bare bones. So in this build, we have 3 bathrooms. One is a part of the primary bedroom, and we have 3 bedrooms. Again, could very easily be 4 or 5 bedrooms because we have a couple areas, one that's skill building, and then we have 2 sort of, I'll say, lounge areas, 2 living areas. So this house could really easily be converted for a huge family if you were doing some sort of challenge or if you just wanted to play with a big family. But yeah, as it is now, we have 3 bathrooms, 3 bedrooms, and the second floor is really pulled back. For this build, I really wanted to stick to very classic wooden furniture, things that you maybe could imagine were made by a craftsman in the town that this house is placed in. And I think the options for that were kind of limited. And honestly, most of the furniture that I used for tables and things was actually from base game. Regardless of the furniture that was available to me, I did want to keep these rooms pretty simple. So on the second floor, we have our primary bedroom, which we haven't got to yet. We have a guest room, which is the one that is a yellow bed that's connected to a bathroom. And then we also have a room that is probably for a teenager. That was kind of what I was thinking for that space, but it's very simple, and that's connected to the same bathroom. So it's sort of a Jack and Jill bathroom situation on the second floor. And then in the teenager's room, in my mind, this was a teenager who was finding themselves and, hasn't necessarily, I wanted this to still feel like it made sense with the build overall. I know it's kind of common in The Sims 4 to make like really unique bedrooms for whoever the sim is, and I just don't think that that's that realistic. I think more often than not in real life, what happens is, you're able to, when you're a teenager, you're able to kind of customize your bedroom in small ways with posters and paintings and stuff. But I don't think most people are getting like completely different furniture. I think a lot of times we're all working, at least I was. I had hand-me-downs from my mom and my dad. And yeah, so I didn't want the bedroom for the teen to feel too separate from the rest of the house. And instead, I just kept it really simple. And I just added some little items that suggested that maybe the teen has, maybe a different design aesthetic than their parents do. So now we're working on the primary bedroom. And the primary bedroom is probably the least authentic setup in my mind, in terms of just the concept of it. So the primary bedroom is on the opposite side of the guest bedroom. So it's on the opposite side of the U house. And it's connected to a bathroom, just like the 2 other bedrooms. But then we also have a room that is being used as more of like a changing room, or just a kind of like a big walk-in closet. We don't have any of those closet items because I'm only using the 3 packs for this, but that's kind of how I was thinking of it. Sort of like a space where the Sims who stay in this bedroom would go and relax a little bit before the day. It's where their laundry goes. There's a cool vanity mirror that counts as a dresser that I don't think I've ever used that item before, so I was happy that I found it for this build. But yeah, so I just think this concept of having 3 connecting rooms attached to just a bedroom is definitely more of a modern idea, but I thought it was nice, a little sort of update for the primary bedroom. And then that's the build. We're going to do a little bit of a quick tour, not necessarily one of those first-person ones, because sometimes I feel like they're disorienting. Do y'all like them? Maybe it's just the way that I move the camera. I don't know. We're just going to do a quick tour sort of at the gameplay camera angle instead. But this is the exterior of the house, and if you are very perceptive and have been watching, I actually ended up flipping the house around. So the door that I was using as the entrance is now actually the back of the home, because I love the idea of walking into this courtyard, and that's, how you enter the house for the first time is walking through the family space. I thought that was really cool. I made the decision to include this tile all the way throughout the home. There were a couple places where I thought I was going to use a different tile. I thought that I was going to use wood flooring, but I really liked having that continued kind of visual throughout the whole home. It made things feel connected and it made things feel real to me. One thing that I love about this flooring swatch is that there are two color variations that are very similar, but one of them looks a little bit more worn, a little bit more used. So what I did for this build was I used both of them in kind of a random pattern. So I would place down the sort of like fresh new version, and then I would take the worn pattern and just place it kind of like all over the place, rotating it as I placed it. And what I love about this is that even though it is the same tile throughout the entire home, it doesn't feel like it's constantly repeating because there is just that tiny bit of difference from tile to tile. So I really love this floor pattern because of that, and I wish they did it with more floors and wallpapers, honestly, because it helps you kind of break up the monotony. I player tested this a lot, and one thing that I noticed is that there are some strange routing, I don't want to say issues, but Sims do kind of take some roundabout ways sometimes while they're getting from point A to point B. I think because some of the rooms have both exterior and interior doors. Like the guest bedroom, it has an exterior door on the porch outside, but it also has an interior door that leads to a bathroom, that leads to another bedroom, that leads to a hallway. And so I noticed that sometimes my Sims would take the exterior door into the guest bedroom and go through all those other rooms to get to the hallway, instead of just taking the door that goes directly to the hallway that's also an exterior door on the same porch. I don't know. For me, this sounds so silly. I don't know if anybody else is going to be on the same page, but for me, these rooms are wobbly and these rooms aren't necessarily connected or laid out in a way that is modern or how we believe design should look today. And I like that. So the fact that there are some, unique routes that your Sims will take, for me, it really exemplifies what I was trying to accomplish in this build. So I'm not making an excuse for weird routing. I like it. So that is my Tuscan farmhouse. I would love to know what you think. If we haven't checked it out already, I also included some overhead shots just to get an idea of the overall layout of this build. One other thing that I did to kind of prepare for this build is I was looking for different resources and information about Italian architecture, both historic and current. I did come across this documentary on YouTube. It's called, I think it was called Tuscaniness, and I'll link it in the description in case you're interested in architecture or Italy or both. But it was really interesting. It's only like 45 minutes long, but it's a group of young architects talking about the general disinterest in long-term thinking for development projects in Italy today, which was so wild to hear because living in a city in the US, one of the things that we are constantly talking about here is how all these apartment complexes are popping up, all these new buildings are popping up that are just so poorly made and quickly made, and everything looks the same, feels the same, you can hear through the walls. That was a lot of what they were talking about in this documentary, is how Italy is filled with these buildings that have stood basically without intervention for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and yet it seems like architects in Italy today are dealing with the same kind of constraints and disadvantages that we have here in the States. But it was very interesting, at least to me, because I'm a nerd for this kind of stuff. If you are, I would recommend you check it out. It's linked in the description of this video. If you're interested in downloading this build, it is now available on the gallery. My name on the gallery is the same as it is here, which is just Patrick Creates. All right, that's it. I said all the things, I did all the stuff. Thank you for sticking around to the end if you're still here. If you are, I appreciate that, and I hope that means I'll see you next time. So until next time, y'all.